Michael had everything: a loving wife, a beautiful baby boy, and a simple yet peaceful life. Every evening, he would sit on the floor, playing with little Jackson as Emily watched with a warm smile. Their home was filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a bright future. But sometimes the smallest problems can set off the biggest storms. It started with a discovery, one that seemed insignificant at first. Emily opened the kitchen cabinet, expecting to grab something for dinner, but instead she froze. Her breath hitched as she stared at the torn food packaging, the unmistakable signs of an infestation. Her stomach twisted in unease as she called for Michael. When he saw it, frustration flickered across his face. "It's just a few rats," he muttered. "I'll take care of it." But Emily's worried expression lingered. Was it really that simple? That night, Michael sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a small box of rat poison. The dim light above flickered, casting long shadows across the room. His fingers traced the edges of the box as doubt crept into his mind. It seemed like the easiest solution. Quick, effective, problem solved. But deep inside, something felt off, an unshakable weight pressing on his chest. A choice made in haste can have consequences beyond imagination. Elsewhere, in the dark corners of the house, a mother rat curled around her tiny babies, shielding them with her fragile body. They were unaware of the silent threat creeping toward them, oblivious to the fate that awaited them. They did not know, they could not know, that death was coming. But neither did Michael. That night, sleep did not come easily. Michael tossed and turned, his mind restless, burdened by an unease he couldn't explain. Then suddenly, a sound. A knock at the door, soft at first, then louder still, echoing through the silence like a distant thunder. His eyes snapped open, his breath quickened. Before he could fully grasp what was happening, the door exploded open. Blinding flashlight beams sliced through the darkness as uniformed police officers stormed into the house. Emily's terrified scream pierced the air as she clutched Jackson against her chest. Michael stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his ears. "What's going on?" he gasped, but his words were swallowed by the chaos. The next moments were a blur, rough hands grabbing him, cold metal snapping around his wrists. The weight of the handcuffs sent a shock through his body. His chest tightened as he struggled to breathe. "This isn't real. This has to be a mistake." But the officers' expressions were unreadable, their grip unyielding. The ride to the station was silent. Michael sat in the back of the police car, his hands cuffed, staring blankly out the window. The flashing red and blue lights painted the streets in eerie streaks, reflecting off his hollow eyes. His thoughts raced, but no answers came. His whole world had shifted in an instant. Then came the cold, unforgiving reality of a jail cell. 4 walls, a hard bench, the suffocating weight of isolation. Michael sat in silence, his hands trembling. He had been accused of murder. 4 innocent people, poisoned. His mind reeled, his stomach twisted. But how? How could this be real? The courtroom was a storm of emotions, anger, grief, judgment. Michael stood in the defendant's area, his jumpsuit heavy on his shoulders, his heart sinking deeper with every word spoken against him. The victim's family sat in the gallery, some sobbing, others staring at him with burning hatred. A young woman's anguished cries shattered the silence. "He killed my fiancée. We were supposed to get married next month." Michael's breath caught in his throat. His defense lawyer spoke, arguing that the victims had been stealing from his home, that the poisoned food was never meant for them. But the words felt distant, drowned by the weight of the accusations. The prosecutor's voice was sharp, unwavering. Michael Evans laced food with poison, and 4 lives were lost. And then, the moment that shattered everything. Guilty! Michael felt the world crash around him. The word echoed through the courtroom, louder than anything he had ever heard before. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. The judge's gavel struck like thunder, sealing his fate. Death by execution. That night, Michael sat in his prison cell, staring at the walls, his heart pounding in his chest. He ran his fingers through his hair, gripping tightly, trying to wake up from this nightmare. But the cold, hard floor beneath him, the distant sounds of prison life, the thick, suffocating silence, it was all real. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, counting down the seconds to his final breath. Then the walk to the execution chamber. Step by step, his feet felt heavier, the hallway stretching endlessly before him. Each flickering light above cast a shadow longer than the last. 2 guards flanked him, their faces emotionless. Michael's hands were bound, his breath short and uneven. Was this how it ended? Was this how his story would be written? The room was silent as the noose was placed around his neck. The wood beneath his feet felt unsteady, his vision blurred. He swallowed hard, his lips trembling. He tried to speak, to plead, but only a whisper escaped. "Give me one more chance." Gasp. Michael's body lurched forward, drenched in sweat. His hands clutched the bed sheets as his chest heaved. The darkness of the prison cell was gone. The cold iron bars had vanished, instead soft blankets, the familiar scent of home. Emily's voice broke through his panic. "Michael, what's wrong?" Her worried eyes met his. His pulse pounded in his ears. He turned, scanning the room. Then, there he was, Jackson, safe, alive, breathing. It was a dream, a nightmare. But was it just that? As the morning sun poured through the kitchen window, Michael sat at the table, staring at the box of rat poison. His hands rested on the wooden surface, but he didn't reach for it. Emily watched him, concern still lingering in her gaze. Then slowly, he smiled, a small, knowing smile, and he shook his head. "We won't use poison. We'll get cats instead." A few days later, Michael walked through the door carrying a pet carrier. Emily raised a brow as Jackson giggled excitedly. Two beautiful cats stepped out, stretching and exploring their new home. Michael watched them, his heart lighter than it had been in days. Jackson reached out, giggling as one of the cats nuzzled him. Emily smiled, and Michael, watching his family, finally understood. Taking a life is easy, but protecting life, that's real courage. Because every action has consequences. A single choice can change everything. Life is precious, even the smallest ones. Michael's dream wasn't just a nightmare, it was a warning, a lesson, and a second chance.